All right, back again live, Monday market update. I'm Matt Gougé. I've got my buddy Nash Paradise with me today, as always. We're going over, some economic news, some jobs numbers, what's going on with tariffs. We're talking about how it is affecting the mortgage rates, the real estate market. We're just a couple of active mortgage professionals who just happen to talk mortgage and real estate all day, every day, 365 days a year. So our insight, in my opinion, is not only valuable, but it's coming from a couple of guys who are, actively in the trenches, doing the work. So if you're at all interested in any of that stuff, join us every Monday. We'll be back each and every Monday, talk about what's going on, talk about what we're seeing, talk about what the numbers are saying, and where, a bunch of different things are headed directionally, like mortgage rates, like the housing market and whatnot. How you doing, Nash?
I'm still sick, fighting pneumonia right now. So if I take a break and start hacking and going for my water, well, hey, it's all right. Because like you said in your very humble introduction, we're awesome, and we've got all the good information, all that valuable stuff is it's going to be good, even if it's through hacky wheezy lungs. We'll still be all right.
Yeah, I hope you're on the mend and you're headed in the right direction. If we had a chart, which we don't, unfortunately, for number of flu cases in the U.S., that is definitely trending in the upward direction. My younger son, was it last week or the week before last? Had a little bit of sickness going on. It seems like everybody in that elementary school was passing things around, and so hopefully you're feeling better, my friend. I don't know how much has it spread in the Paradise household, or
my wife got it, flu A. Then my daughter's had a fever for 6 days now, so she's having to go back into the ER. And then this morning, my son started showing symptoms. So he's at home now. So my sick wife is at home with a sick daughter and my sick boy.
Oh, my gosh.
Not a lot of fun. Mine didn't last too long on the flu. But then, there's a lot of people that are getting pneumonia after the fact, or just like lingering coughs for weeks. And it's just, I'm 40. I don't remember a flu season that's been this bad. But North Texas is the second worst in the entire nation, behind Oklahoma. I can't remember what city in Oklahoma, but it's rough down here. We're all getting sick, and weather changes are weird, and pollen stuff is aggravating allergies. But we do have some good things to talk about. We had a lot of fun last week talking about tariffs, warning about job numbers coming down, seeing so much impact with the current administration here in these, first month or so. It gives us a lot of cool things to talk about and how they directly relate. So let's do a quick recap, talk about what we said were big news, big ticket items last week. We'll get in some nerd stuff, and then we'll talk about exactly how this is going to apply going forward, and if there's any good call to actions this week, if that sounds good to you, Mr. Gucci.
Let's do it, brother. Let's jump in.
All right. So the big news last week, the star on the calendar, the dart that we were throwing was for non-farm payrolls. And if you remember correctly, non-farm payrolls were the huge big ticket movement item in December. It's what sent rates up really significantly all of a sudden, and it was because the projections I mean, they missed by something like 70%. It was huge. Maybe I'm exaggerating, call it 60%, but it missed bad. And we were set up with a hold your horses, let's see what's up going on for these January non-farm payroll numbers, because, you know, the previous figure last month, non-farm payrolls came in at 256,000. The projection was 170,000. That was scary. Last time we missed big, it's because the projection was 165. Well, numbers came in at 143. We actually missed on the low end. So not a lot of jobs getting added for January at all. Way under previous, way under like anything else. What's kind of crazy too, didn't move the market, but the revision for the December numbers. Again, December was saying 165,000 was a projection, came in at 256, has been revised to 307. So it's
wow.
Like, I know. It's like we added an insane, I mean, you talk about missing, that becomes nearly 100% miss now after the revision. But for whatever reason, the markets didn't react much. So you're thinking, oh man, we go low on non-farm payrolls. That should have helped rates a lot last week. Why didn't they move a whole bunch? Well, unemployment rate went down. How is that possible that payroll could miss by such a significant factor? And the unemployment rate actually goes from 4.1 to 4.0. Well, rounding has a lot to play in there. It's not nearly as big of a miss as it sounds, but that balance of the employment rate dropping and the non-farm payrolls missing, those two things should not coincide with each other in that way. Employment rate should have gone up a little bit if we're not adding jobs. Since they didn't, they kind of balance each other out. And so all the cool news last week, everything we're watching, you know, global S&P, NBA purchase index, like the only good takeaway I've got from last week's data is that mortgage applications are way down. I mean, way down. And that's significant to everyone in our world, but as well as just general real estate, is not a lot of people are applying for homes right now. They're not applying for new loans. It's going to impact our spring market a little bit. But the cool thing that we've been seeing lately, you know, back in my day, I've been doing this 19 years. People would apply, they get pre-approved, and they may buy 3 to 6 months later, 6 to 9 months later. Well, we live in an Amazon.com, DoorDash, Uber Eats society now. People take action very, very quickly. So, you know, these trailing numbers on mortgage applications, okay, they are what they are over the winter break. Yeah, there weren't a bunch of apps, but we could just suddenly like take off. And, you know, people that apply right now could be under contract in a week or 2 weeks because there's enough really good inventory at really good prices. So it's not something where I think we need to be panicking about that. But that was my biggest takeaway on last week's news.
Yeah, I think there's something to report as somebody who's actively working with buyers. There's no way to put this into data, but I would imagine is the case across the country, as is the case with my business, and you'll tell me if it's with yours as well. You know, I've got 100+ buyers who are pre-approved, have been pre-approved. They wouldn't count as a tick on that number as a new mortgage application, right? Because they originally applied and had a soft credit pull done 3 months ago, 6 months ago. And with the, you know, cycle times between application and actually closing escrow lengthening, they have been for years. There's probably, and I say probably, which I should change to certainly, a lot of sidelined buyers that wouldn't show up on a mortgage application report as a, you know, new mortgage application, but they're still in a position where if and when the home came across that fit the bill for them, they would be able to take action. And so we'll see. It's a very interesting time in real estate where there's a lot of people who are wavering.
Yeah, I think that speaks a lot to the dichotomy of, you know, these different locations. It's demographics. You're going to deal with a lot higher purchase prices, a lot higher loan amounts. The people that you're pre-approving are probably going to be approved for that area. They could go a little higher. They could go a little bit lower. You know, when you can buy a $600,000, $700,000, $800,000 house, you can kind of buy whatever you want, to be honest. You're usually going to have some flexibility in your debt ratio. So like you said, they're getting pre-approved and they're hanging out and they're waiting for that right property to hit. Well, in a lot of the nation, Midwest, South, Gulf states, my area in Texas, it's a little bit different. It's people are applying and then finding out, okay, in order to buy this $350K home, I'm going to have to spend $3,100 a month. What? Yeah, no, that's not going to work for me. So they're on the sidelines differently. They're on the sidelines waiting for affordability, because if it does meet their criteria, if it does fit their comfort and their goals, they can take action. There's a lot of good inventory in my area right now. And I think in your area, like, why is someone going to sell their $700K home, to buy a 1.1 million, 1.4, maybe to scale down into something else, maybe to move to a different part of the country? If they're not in a position where they need to sell right now, they may not be. It's hard to sell with that 3% interest rate and go buy with that 7%. So I think that really just speaks to, your experience is very different from mine, and it's going to be different for everyone based on where you are. So I find that kind of fascinating. Speaking of mortgage rates, you want to jump into the charts and nerd out here for a little bit?
Yeah, let's do it. I just want to put a cherry on top of what you were saying, so the people that are listening hear it and understand it. You can't talk national housing market and say prices are flat, prices are down, prices are up. When it comes to the housing market, quote unquote, every single market behaves differently, and within each market, there might be the luxury stuff in your neighborhood doing one thing as far as how fast it's selling and if it's going above the listing price or below. And then the entry-level stuff doing something completely different. So if you're a buyer or if you're involved in this in any way, know that it's vitally important to have local professionals that can help guide you. Because the advice for somebody in North Texas who's buying a home for $350,000 might vary drastically. The strategies used to get an offer accepted, all kinds of things are going to be different than somebody who's buying something between $500,000 and $600,000 in Sacramento, California. And oh, by the way, over time, this can change too, right? Like inventory levels change, mortgage rates change, and all kinds of different things change. Where if you're not working with somebody, and I mentioned this in a separate video interview I think I did last week, you need to not only deal with professionals who are experienced and have done it before and understand the market. It's really, really important that they're active. Yeah. A real estate agent who is great and has lived in the neighborhood for 30 years is, part of it. But if they're not actively transacting multiple transactions per quarter, they're just not going to have a finger on the pulse and be able to, properly advise or best advise you as a buyer or a seller, how to go about, for a seller, selling quick at top dollar. As a buyer, getting in a contract at a great price, and things like that. And so I've always said this, Nash, over the last, decade of doing mortgage. But I think when markets are weird, might be a good word for the current market. It's even more important that you have the right professionals in your corner.
That's cute that you were putting a cherry on it. You literally just dropped like a 4-course meal with a porterhouse and ruined my call to action and the entire summary for the end of this call that we were going to relate back to. But hey, I don't blame you for jumping the gun there, because that is the call to action. Is every market is different. You're 100% right. Even the demographics within the market, if you're not working with a professional, if you don't know if they're a professional or not, it's never been more important to interview your potential candidates, not just someone's neighbor's sister's cousin who cuts their hair and does real estate on the side. You got to work with the right people. So thank you for jumping the gun and ruining my point. Now we're going to have to find a different call to action here at the end.
Trust me, that's so important. We can do it all over again, and we could add 3 more cherries on top. All right, let's get into the nerd stuff that you like, brother. Where's the charts at?
Let's nerd out. Let's take a look first at the overnight average interest rates. I always just go straight to the blue line because the blue line is the best bit of data here. Small uptick last week, but we're still hovering around 7%. At one point, we got to like 7.00. Now we're at 7.03. As a reminder, this is overnight average conventional loan pricing. Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, this is your 20% down, 780 credit score. This doesn't talk about how many points or what the costs or the buy down here. So, I've seen conventional loans pricing out at 7.5. I've seen conventional loans at 6.625. Investments, second homes, things like that are always going to be higher. But what we're really looking at these charts for are trends. Which direction are we heading and how are we going? And while it looks like there's a little curvy tick up there at the end, it's not a great representation just because we are really hanging in a tight window here. with room to move either way. But yeah, that's where rates are. Let's move, unless you got something to say on that. Let's say let's get into the Fed stuff.
Pretty flat with rates is all I got to say about the last couple of weeks in the land of what are mortgage rates doing.
As flat as the Texas Panhandle, which, just so you know, we're pretty flat. We got no hills here. What you guys call a hill, we'd call a mountain. But hey, let's going through the March Fed meeting. This is consistent, as you pointed out last week. Looking at the week over week impact on the changes for the projections here at the bottom is pretty significant and kind of cool, actually. 1 month ago, 75% of the data showed that we're staying consistent. Right now, it's at 91.5. Pretty fair compared to a day ago when it was at 92. Everyone is pretty much confirmed that we're not going to see enough data to get us a movement in March. But we got a big break between March and May 7th. So let's see if the May 7th has moved a little bit. Yeah, no, pretty much unchanged from a day ago, from a week ago, and a month ago. We are still trending in the direction of no movement. 73.1% are saying we're not going to see a rate drop in May. I would agree with that. Any different interpretation there, Matt?
No, sir. Looks like, staying pat until further notice.
All right. I've had a target on the June 18th meeting because I feel like if we make it all the way to June 18th without a rate cut, which I believe we will, that's going to be kind of like go time. I feel like there's going to be a lot of pressure on the Fed by the time we get to June 18th. I mean, that's halfway through the year. There's going to be a lot of data in this period that we're going to be watching and tracking. And again, without expecting anything to happen in this interim, we're going to want to see some market movement, in a positive way. We're going to want to see that these, rate increases and now the resulting rate cuts coming down, that we're still maintaining the inflation figures, that things are moving the direction that we want. So the interesting data here, we've actually trended just a hair in the last couple days into a possibility of a cut. That the split just from a day ago, has improved by 1.5%, not a lot, but we're getting a lot more in the middle here on whether or not we see a cut in June.
Right. Yeah. Which there's a lot of stuff data wise between now and then that we're going to see, and so this is subject to change. But for now, it's a lot more of the hurry up and wait and see what. Data dependent, I think, is a word the Treasury uses.
Yeah, they love that word. So I think the focus that we're going to have, week over week, as we keep talking about this and looking for trends and seeing movements in data, is it June or is it July? Which one's it going to be? The July meeting isn't until the 30th. Let's see what the projection looks like that on now. I believe we have the data. Yes, we do. Right now, overwhelmingly, by July 30th, we should have one cut from the Fed. So I keep seeing things online, different Facebook groups, real estate professionals saying, hey, no Fed rate cuts in 2025. Well, no, this disputes that very, very clearly, that by the time we get here, the majority opinion is that we will have seen one cut. We still have, a total of 20% stating 2 or more cuts by this point. And interestingly enough, looking at 1 month ago versus, 1 week ago versus now, we're getting, a little bit more movement on assuming one cut by the time we get to July 30th, which, again, that's pretty deep in the year for the first cut when we originally thought we'd see 5 cuts this year. So not great news, but we should still get a cut this summer.
Right. Yeah. Agreed. It's, they're not doing anything super fast, and the data continues to kind of back up the Fed stance that there's not any need for, them to be in a hurry to cut that Fed funds rate.
100%. So let's jump out of the nerd stuff and talk about this week in econ data and know what's coming down the pipeline. I'm going to call it a pretty slow week, to be honest. We've got testimony from Jerome Powell on Tuesday. We know Powell. We know he's not going to say anything that's incredibly interesting. So we can, there's a star on that, but not really. Looking at Wednesday, that's really the only day for good data this week. So that's the one to be looking out on. What I think is interesting about the Tuesday data is we're getting our month-over-month core CPI. This is inflation month over month. previous month was 0.2%. And the previous projection was 0.2. The month before was 0.2. The projection was 0.2. A lot of flat inflation figures. Well, the projection is 0.3 for Wednesday's month-over-month core CPI in January. So, we talked about that a little bit. We are replacing some pretty interesting data in December for January. That's why we've got this month-over-month. So I do think that hitting that 0.3, it could all come down to rounding, to be honest. But if we miss that, and inflation is not going up, that could be really good for rates. There is some room here to miss on inflation and see rates improve. The opposite is true as well, but I love seeing a projection of inflation increasing just because that leaves more room on the low side. The problem is we've got this conflicting data now. Like in the same day, we're going to have year over year core CPI for January. And that's what we've been talking about for a while, is the replacement of the January figures should show inflation going down. Well, we've got a projection that reflects that as well. So from a previous year over year at 3.2%, now the projections are showing 3.1%. That this is your big core CPI. This is the big inflation data that markets seem to really move on. PCE is a little bit more important, but it doesn't matter because the markets are going to move on CPI. It's your consumer price index. This is how much everything costs. So year over year, it's supposed to look like it's going down because of what we're replacing in January. So funny enough, we're expecting the month over month to go up, inflation going up, getting more expensive, but year over year going down. We hit both of those, could be really good, but there's a little bit of disconnect where we could have what happened last Friday. Jobs numbers go one way, but unemployment goes the opposite way, and we just wind up pretty flat. If I'm throwing out projections for this week's nerd stuff, I'm throwing out some fairly flat projections. I don't think that because those are going different directions, I really don't think we're going to see anything crazy happen.
Yeah, I think that, as always, there's room to go either way, and the safe bet is probably a lot of what we've seen in the last couple of weeks is just a lot of boring flat mortgage rate projections, which I think that's something that people should think about that are in the market. And I don't know if you got more nerd speak to talk about, but maybe since I stole your thunder on the other topic, we can just talk about, what should people be doing if they're in the market to purchase, to move up, to move down. And, I see so many people, Nash, I think this is good advice to give people, is like waiting hasn't helped them. I don't know what they're waiting for, especially when we've got so much just nothingness happening in terms of rates, in terms of different things that would affect affordability. I unfortunately see too many people waiting themselves into 2028, right? And so I don't know what it looks like in your market or what advice you have for clients on that front, but I think it's an interesting combo.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I want to close with that. The only other, not quite nerd stuff, but the only other takeaway I wanted to address from our conversation last week was what was going on with the tariffs that were, kind of a big deal as directly related to mortgage rates and the housing market. As most people saw, we've got 30-day pauses with both Canada and Mexico. So, this feels very much art of the deal. Trump coming out and making big threats with big leverage. We have a lot of leverage over Canada and Mexico for their exports. The majority of their exports are coming to the United States. So, getting what we want, getting more border security, getting them to beef up, their own forces to help mitigate, the control of illegal drugs, all that good stuff, all the political stuff. It looks like we're going to get what we want over that. So now most prevailing theories are showing that we shouldn't have any major significant movement on tariffs. If we have them, you're talking about cost of vehicles and the cost of, even energy, it was only a 10% versus a 25, but that was still going to impact cost, which is going to impact inflation here. Right now, it's a big old fat nothing burger with cheese. So we'll get back to this in the next couple of weeks if we think that those 30 days are going to expire. But right now, because the big topic, the title of last week's message was how are tariffs going to impact rates? Well, we can wait 30 days to see if there's even going to be any kind of impact. But to your question and what I wanted to close with, like you said, what do you say to someone who's waiting right now? And I can sum that up pretty easily. Find your win. There's going to be a win out there. What is your win? What's your why? Why are you looking to buy? I've got a lot of clients in my market who want their home. They want a place for their family. They want a spot for the dog. They want to own something. And unfortunately, my feedback to them is, find your house, not your home. Your house is an investment vehicle. It is an appreciating asset. If you're going to be spending the money anyway, spend it in something that makes sense. And sometimes that means going for that small 2-bedroom. It means going for that 3-bed that's 20 minutes further away from work because it's something that you can afford. Because a lot of my buyers are renters. They're first-time home buyers. They're unfortunately people that sold when the market was great just to make a move later. But now they're comparing their previous affordability to the current market. And man, it's a really tough pill to swallow. So changing that mental mindset just a little bit from this is my home, it's where I live, what am I comfortable spending, to I really got to find the highest and best use of my funds on a monthly basis. Where can I get the most appreciation? Where can I park my money for the next 2 to 3 years, build up some equity to then get what I really want? It's not fun having to look at a ladder to eventually get where you want to be, but if you're not in that game, taking advantage of that appreciation, even though it should be lower in the next couple of years, like you said, you're going to be waiting till 2027, 2028, and the numbers aren't going to look better. Even if interest rates are a lot lower, it's not going to be in a better position than if you took action now.
Right. Yeah. The one thing that for sure in real estate is going to yield you a win is time in the market. And, doesn't mean go out there and buy anything. Doesn't mean, there's not good and bad, quote unquote, real estate investments. But so many people are looking for a slight edge here or there, where the true edge in real estate is like how long you hold it, right? You buy something today and you hold it for a decade, you're going to win. It's going to appreciate like near 100% of the time. There's a couple periods where you can say, oh, if I bought in 06 to 16, maybe it went down 1% in this sub.
I don't know if it did. I think you give it 10 years, you're pretty much winning at I know what you're trying to say, but
right. That's the thing too. Is I'm trying to be fair, but it's one of those things where, if held long enough, real estate, always appreciates. People are gonna, poo-poo that argument because coming from a mortgage broker who makes a living from writing loans, but I'm eating my own dog food. I'm an investor in real estate, and I've got real estate holdings myself, and so I believe it. And in markets where people was like, "Oh my gosh, it's a tough market to buy, or you shouldn't buy," I was buying then. I was buying in 06, and I was buying in 22, and all the years in between. And so,
it's just math. Math doesn't lie. And like you said, I think one of the cool takeaways there is know how long. If you're going to be buying a property to stay at for 2 years, 3 years, something like what I just talked about, like a level up or maybe you're taking a couple steps backwards to take a couple steps forward. That's where you really need the experts. Like you said earlier, the person who's in the market, who's doing things actively, a professional mortgage broker who knows this stuff and can help you look at the short term as well as long-term efficacy of that investment. Because we are seeing some people losing right now who bought last year, and everyone that I know that's losing right now bought new construction. That's just, it is what it is. They had incentives, they had, forward commitments on interest rates. So yeah, I can get a 5.99% rate or 4.99 with this particular builder. But then you look at that compared to the existing market and the resale homes, it's like, okay, I'm getting 2,200 square feet with the same price could have gotten me 300,000 or 3,000 square feet. And, those are some neighborhoods where people have had to sell, they've had to get out, and the prices have dropped, and builders are now building that same model cheaper than they were last year. So, over 10 years, yeah, you're still going to win. Cool. No big deal. But, if you're doing a short-term, projection here, be careful, work with experts, because new construction is the easiest place to win now with interest rates and incentives, but it's also the best place to lose in the next 2 to 3 years, as you can't compete with other new construction homes. That's really designed for someone who wants everything custom, everything the way that they want to. It's designed for long-term hold. And it's my entire career, it's always been like that. You shouldn't be seeing immediate instant appreciation on that stuff unless you're really talking about a diamond in the rough.
Yeah, I love that, man. And that's great advice to close on for anybody in the real estate market. Know your timeline, and you should be doing one of two things: working with somebody who's asking you those questions, or if not, you ask those questions yourself, right? And if you're buying with a spouse, if you're buying solo, whoever you're buying with, these are the conversations to have, right? Where do we see ourselves in 5 years? How long are we in this house? This, something that is going to turn into an investment property that we're going to rent out once we leave it? Are we going to, take that equity and, parlay it and roll it into the next house? You don't have to have all the answers, but at the very least, have those conversations and have somewhat of a game plan. Because then you work with somebody like, Nash Paradise or myself, who by default, by doing a couple thousand loans, just understands how this might play out and can give you advice based on, well, in the past, I've seen a buyer do this or do that, or here's a product that's available to us as a mortgage broker, where if you're only going to be there for 3 years, maybe you do this. If this is your forever home, then maybe you want to do that. But, without having those conversations internally or with a professional, and thinking about it and strategizing, you just might get yourself in a position where, you're not in the right home with the right mortgage product. And, you want to do it right or to the best of your ability based on, where you're headed and what your goals are.
Get a plan, get an expert. Love it.
Yep. It's great advice, brother. All right. We shall see you next week, my friend.
Take care.
All right. You too, man. Later.